Okay, so I want to go through some Leafs young guy questions with you, and I want to start with this one because just Cowan goes down today. Can't go to the AHL. It was a bit of a tough decision, I think, from that standpoint. Not like he's NHL ready, but what did you see from him in the preseason? And secondarily, do you have concerns about him playing another year of junior hockey and stalling the development? Like, in an ideal world, what would you do with him?
So the first part of the question, I thought he started off well in the rookie games in Montreal. His first game was really strong. Second game was okay, not poor, but just okay. I thought his main camp with the big team was, it was kind of inconsistent. It was a little bit up and down. What you would expect out of a young player, I suppose. I didn't feel like he was given the luxury or afforded the luxury of some of the other younger players around the league, if you will, in terms of who he played with on any given night. But having said that, he also had some power play touches, which I thought he was fine. Like
he got London Knights line. He got London Knights line.
Yeah, he get that too the one night. That's right. And inconsistent is the best way I would put it. Some of the things, my takeaways on the positive side, no problem with the pace. I think that he was stuck sometimes trying to identify all of his responsibilities in all three zones, which kind of took away from some of his creativity and maybe risk taking where he can be rewarded with a little bit more risk. But again, he didn't look ready, and I have to say I was a little bit surprised. I thought that he was going to get an audition here at the beginning of the year. I thought that he was going to be more prepared, but it's okay. It's fine. It's a long journey, as we all know. And going back to London, the second part of your question, I have zero concerns because it's the London Knights, and I have gone through this with some of our drafted players in the past, and like years ago, we had Owen Tippett get returned to Mississauga in the Ontario Hockey League at that time. And, it wasn't anything to do with the coaching staff there because they run a fantastic development program in Mississauga, now Brampton. Like, they really do a very good job. But the environment was a little bit different in Mississauga. Like the building's not full. There's not as many eyes on you, et cetera. So, we were worried about his self-motivation to a degree. That's not going to happen with Cowan. Like, he's going back to play for the Hunters. The London Knights are going to be a juggernaut. He's going to carry the mail there. And I expect him to have a fantastic season. But I do want him to get more involved, JD. Like, I don't know what you thought, but I didn't think that I thought that he could have physically been more involved. I thought he could have been more tenacious. I've seen so much of that out of him in the past, and he really gets a lot of his success is driven from that. Like, he gets opportunities off of that. So I'm looking for that in his return.
Yeah. I'm not going to say I will. I was a little underwhelmed, but it's preseason hockey. I'm not watching it. I'm not watching it with the same critical eye. But when I do try to pay a little bit more attention as to the shifts for guys where I feel like they have an opportunity to make the team, it's why I think Liljegren at this point is basically a goner. But when I'm watching him play in the preseason, he didn't look like a guy who was desperate for a job. And I thought, man, this is as bad of a sign of anything. Like, you're out there with the AHLers, you got to match the AHLer energy, you got to match the AHLer pace, you got to give that effort level to catch people's attention and make sure that you look like you're a guy dying for a spot. With Cowan, it wasn't like an energy thing for me. I just saw a guy who looked maybe at times a little bit overwhelmed by the moment. And that's fine given his age. I think the big thing for me is, London. It's the London Knights. The things that you mentioned, you know way more intimately than I do, and I believe you when you say it. My bigger thing is, how do you develop as a player from an actual skill set standpoint? Because I don't worry about him becoming complacent mentality wise. Seems like he's got a great head on his shoulders. Looks like he's got a good camp around him. Looks like he's just that kind of self-motivated kid anyways. But from a skill set standpoint, how much can you get better in that year? And how do you focus on those things that are not like junior level things, but they're NHL level things?
Yeah, no, that is an absolutely fair assessment and concern, I guess, from your point of view, because you have to keep pushing forward. So you have to set goals in stages if you're a player like this, and the Leafs player development team will be not in his ear every week. You know, he's had this long run with Toronto Maple Leaf stuff. Like, now it's time for him to go back there, get settled in, you know, and give him a little bit of a reset there, give him a break, to be honest with you. But, you know, before you know it, World Junior training camp is going to be on the horizon, right? So, you know, that talk starts to enter into it. And, you know, what do you want to be when you get to World Juniors? So if I'm him and I'm part of his camp, it's like, you know, last year you were a fourth liner who had to play an energy/penalty killing role. What do you want to be this year when you go? Do you want to be a top six guy? Do you want to be that impact guy like you are in the Ontario Hockey League? And if you do want to be that, then let's set the tone early and often and play at an exceptionally elite level, not only to your offensive identity at the junior level, but with everything else that comes along with it as well that will translate into pro success, but also Team Canada success. So there's a goal that's sitting right in front of you. There's going to be some nights, though. You know, there's going to be some nights that he goes into, you know, Owen Sound. I love Dale DeGray, the general manager there. I've known Digger forever, but, you know, Owen Sound is not a great team this year. And there's going to be those nights at
guys
that level.
Basking for trade requests already in Owen Sound. It's not looking good for old
Sam
McKee.
that's never good for them. Never usually happens there because it's such a, like, they treat their kids so well. But anyways, I digress and say that, you know, they're not great. And so you're going to go into some nights where, you know, some bad habits might just enter into the equation if you're chasing points. But again, I just think that Mark and Dale are going to hold him accountable. I think the Leafs being basically in his back door or backyard, pardon me. You know, you can't run from it. So it's going to be fun. It's just going to be a journey.
So when like outside of the things like showing up to camp in shape, right, and being physically ready and seeing guys like, okay, who put the work in during the off season. Like, you as a talent evaluator, when you're watching a preseason game, is there anything that, you know, you really look for as markers of success? Like, is there anything that you can glean from it? And I ask this because, I want to get into Nick Robertson with you in a second. There's a player who has torn up the preseason before. And I mentioned, like, effort level is obviously a huge differentiator when it comes to these games. Like, I think about, I'm sorry to use the player specifically because he actually had a really good career in Europe. But the Leafs in 2015 brought in Brandon Cowan, and he obliterated the preseason. And I went, oh, my God, this guy is a guy. And he got 20 games with the Leafs, and did he score? I think he maybe got a goal or two. But it obviously didn't translate. And again, different time, different whatever. But the preseason has a history of, like, fooling fans and fooling people about, like, what a guy can actually be. And an undersized player who can score and who has offensive skill set. I mentioned him in particular because that's sort of what he was. Robertson, obviously better, higher pedigree, all this different stuff. But, like, what matters to you when you watch these guys? Like, is there anything, or do you kind of already have it set in place from the practices and what you've seen? Like, where do you get it?
Yeah, that's a fascinating example, by the way, because I remember Cowan because he's a little guy too, like 5'8" guy, whatever, you know, darting forward. So here's what you look for in a player when they get to camp. There's only one puck, and there's only a certain amount of roles in the top six. If you are an elite point producer, call it Cowan at the junior level. Like, let's talk about two different. We're going to go into Robertson after, and that's going to be different. So let's just look at Cowan for a sec. The takeaway for me coming out of development camp and coming to main camp would be this. Okay, strength, you know, obviously, you know, you have to continue to work on whatever they identified. It could have been his legs, his core. I don't know what it was. It doesn't matter. He was definitely stronger. He is definitely stronger today than he was a year ago. Even Fraser Minton looked that way before he went down with that unfortunate injury. Like, he did look definitely stronger. Even though he had a cup of coffee last year, he's definitely stronger this year. So the takeaway are things you can control, like your fitness, your preparation. You can control that, right? The other thing you can control when you get to main camp, big boy games, is you better have a B game. So when you're not scoring, you better be tenacious to try and create turnovers. You better be on time defending in your zone. You better be tracking back religiously in all three zones. Like, you know, your offensive zone exits better be on time, because you have to give me a reason to believe that you're close to being NHL ready. You're not always going to have the puck. You're not always going to be scoring. So make sure that the compete and the pace and the way you think, all those things have elevated and got to a new place. And then that's when I start to expect more of your elite element to take shape, because there's not as much space. Everybody's bigger, stronger, all those types of things. You have to adjust to that before you start to score. Your example of Cowan is fantastic, because when you get a guy who's already had in the American League like he had back then, and he had played, I think, for the Marlies, if I'm not mistaken, whatever. So when you get a guy like that who's had that kind of a runway, he's already his elite element is already. But now, can he do the other stuff? And the answer was pretty quick to arrive. Right? He couldn't do the other things. So that's what I'm looking for in prospects. You better have a B game so your A game can evolve. And that's what brings me to Robertson. If you don't mind me just bleeding
this is where I'm going. Yeah, no, go.
Okay, so like on Robertson, he's shown me some things in this preseason that I believe translate to potentially more impact or trustworthy impact at the NHL level if he can continue doing it. Let's be honest, the matchups haven't been, super hard yet. When you play an elevated role where they know you're going to be in a like, let's say he gets on the power play now. Let's say he gets a cup of coffee occasionally in the top six. These types of things, your matchups are going to be much harder, especially on the road. Like the opponents, the coach is going to see you and your line come over, and he's going to match up against that for whatever reason, which is giving you respect. I get it, but it also makes it harder. So, are you going to be able to do that? The kid scored 14 goals last year, all at even strength. He didn't get any power play time. His dart and dash has been better. He's been on it, tenaciously trying to create turnovers so far in the preseason. One concern for me, JD, and I think we would all agree with this, is that he does absorb contact a great deal, right? Like he took some heavy, hard hits in the preseason. I'm hoping that he can stay healthy for the good of him, never mind the Leafs, just the good of him, and figure it out and make it happen. I'm still on the fence, though. He's had a great training camp. The prove it's going to come in the first 20 games of the season for me, and then, we'll see where it goes.
Well, in those first 20 games, the way that the lines look like they're shaken out to start is just front-loaded once again, that the Nylander center experiment's not going to happen. Like, how much can you learn if he's on a line with Pontus Holmberg and Max Pacioretty?
Yeah, not sure. I mean, that's where he's got to continue to give the coaching staff a reason to, if Domi isn't, let's say, Max plays fast. We know what Max does, but Max also has some brain farts sometimes, right? So if for some reason the coach believes that, I got to switch something out there because I'm not liking, or send Max a message, or just, for the good of the group, maybe he supplants somebody for a short period of time. And if he does, he's got to take advantage of the opportunity. You're not wrong, though. I mean, to play with Holmberg and Pacioretty, it's not, for me personally, like the Pacioretty thing, like I'm a Bobby McMahon guy. I know Bobby McMahon's preseason wasn't, as good as, maybe some expected, but he scored 15 goals last year, JD, and he plays the right way. He plays north-south. He plays hard. He's got pace, all that stuff. And I didn't think Pacioretty was exceptional in the preseason. And this guy scored 4 goals last year and was he was on. If he plays the full season in Washington last year, he's the worst plus-minus on the team. So there's some prove it that's going to go along here. I'm sure McMahon's going to get in sooner than later. But what I'm trying to tell you is that, yeah, it's not perfect in the 3-hole. It's not the best look. So he's going to have to get touches, Robertson that is, on the power play to hopefully burn a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been pretty strong on record with this. I really hope I'm wrong. I think Pacioretty, by all accounts, is a good guy, smart guy. I've spoken to him a couple of times. Obviously has pedigree. There's obviously parts of his game that I think still work, but the idea that you could limit opportunities for guys like Robertson or McMahon to fit him into your roster in kind of an uncomfortable way when, they preach this competition thing, it's like, that's fine. I didn't think Pacioretty did something in the preseason that warranted, hey, no questions asked. He won the competition in comparison to some of those other guys. But yeah, so I guess we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, was there anybody else in the preseason to you then? Because yeah, it sounds like Robertson you really liked. Was there somebody else with this team that you noticed and you jotted it down and went, yeah, you know what? I really liked what I saw from this guy, and maybe he can exceed my expectations a little bit or meet them if they were already higher.
I thought the goaltending really stood out for me, I have to say. I think Hildeby looks much closer to being an NHL goaltender. I actually thought he could have a cup of coffee. He kind of did have a cup of coffee. He practiced, let's be honest. He sat on the bench. So, I thought last year it was a maybe that, he could be a backup. I'm pretty secure in my belief right now that he's at worst a backup. I actually think that he's also an asset. So something to keep an eye on depending on where the season goes. I mean, obviously, with Wall here and signed to the extension, and then Stolarz for a couple of years, how long does Hildeby want to be kind of in the minors waiting for his turn? We'll see how that goes, but I thought Hildeby was really good. I actually like the look of the goaltending right across the board. So one thing that I didn't really like in the past was that the structure of the play in the crease. And what I mean by that is that, some goaltenders, you think Marty Brodeur way back in the day, you knew he was going to come out and play the puck. Outside of being an elite goaltender, you knew he was going to play the puck. He would launch the attack. You know what I mean? You knew what you were getting all the time. With Leafs goaltenders in the past, even most recent, I didn't feel like we were getting the same. So Samsonov on any given night would be like a mess in the crease, right? He could be really good, but there's other nights he was swimming all over the place, and it makes life difficult on your defense when you're defending. The structure of the goaltenders right now, they're big. Mm-hmm. They play between their posts. They're not busy. I think that that's what stood out for me for sure was the goaltending. The other thing I have to say, and it's more on the disappointment side, like Timmins is in right now. I think he was fine. I think that he's, I actually thought that going into camp, he might be an asset to move out, depending on where we were going to go with a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But he's earned a job for now. That's fine. But I'm going back to the Liljegren thing. Liljegren is a shell of himself. I'm concerned, not because I believe in his trajectory anymore, more because it's $3 million, and mm-hmm. every nickel matters. So that definitely stood out for me. That he looks. I don't want to say scared. That I don't know what the adjective is that I'm looking for here. Definitely lacking confidence, mm-hmm. and I'm not so sure that he's going to be the guy that's long for the way that Craig Berube wants him to play.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Let me take it back. You're right. As soon as I say it, it's like, yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I actually think the more interesting question with him now is, do you just, if you can get him off the books, you just take him off the books for essentially nothing? Because for a while you thought at least there would be some kind of return for him, and I'm not really understanding who's giving an actual piece back for Timothy Liljegren at this point. I think that's going to upset a lot of fan base because he has his defenders, and he's had some good years, granted with sheltered minutes in terms of his numbers, but yeah. I think it's pretty painfully clear given if Timmins is jumping you at his dollar rate and what he provides you, and there's real meaningful conversations one is that the second Hakanpää can step on the ice if he can, that you're gone. I think he's in a tough spot to be engaged mentally. I do fault him because that's your job and you've got to try to go out and prove people wrong. But I do understand when you see the Hakanpää signing, you see the organization moving towards these big, heavy defensemen at the bottom of the lineup and knowing that's not who you are, and seeing them kind of show favor to others. And, Cade Weber gets this 2-year deal, and it's a one-way year on the first one, but it's a 2-way deal in the first year. It's a one-way deal in the second. I feel like Liljegren, he's sort of picking up on the energy that the organization was giving off to him all along. And now the question is just what can you actually get back for him, and can you move him, and how quickly do you do it?
Yeah, no, that is a question, and you're not going to get full. Well, I guess you could get a team to eat the money, which is going to lower the return in terms of a draft pick because, you're going to, but they have zero draft capital. The Leafs are stuck that way as well. There's so many moving parts behind the scenes when you're moving players in and out here. And, it's a changing. Listen, Brad Treliving inherited a certain type of body type, a certain type of team. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now he's trying to put his own stamp on it to try and build out a certain type of roster. If you play Liljegren in the 3 on the back end with, call it Benoit, he's proven he can play north of 17 minutes if required, right? Mm-hmm. But Liljegren, who's he going to beat out for extra minutes? If Hakanpää's coming back, we already talked about that. But Tanev's going to be eating minutes. McCabe's going to be eating minutes. So now you're down to 10 or 12 minutes for Liljegren, and with the style of game that he plays. Mm-hmm. And the hiccups that he demonstrates on occasion, or sometimes more than on an occasion, is it worth it? And so my answer is no. You can't have $3 million in the 3. So, yeah, it's not going to be long, I don't believe, for something to go one way or the other. But here, the caveat is Timmins has got to do his job too. So, you got to get it done, kid.
So this is the thing for me is I've never really been a Liljegren guy. Like even from the outset of his career, pretty much like right after they drafted him. There was just some things that I heard from some people about the hockey IQ and just some stuff that just I wasn't like, oh, this is going to be a guy that I'm buying stock on. I think it was more than, well, you would know this, way more intimately. You would actually know this for a fact, but like it was more than just mono as to why he fell to where he did in the draft. And it was sort of played off that way. Like he had a down year because of mono, and that's the reason why he fell to Leafs, and they grabbed him and they went with the pedigree and the original projection. That said, I don't like Timmins. If you're telling me about a team that has Chris Tanev, who has a history with injuries, and with McCabe, who's getting older and plays a real physical brand of hockey, and the amount of left shot D you have, the counter, I'm arguing against myself here with Liljegren going, well, you got to get rid of the $3 million. You can't have it be for a bottom six guy. As a replacement, Hakanpää, again, another guy where it's like you're really going to lean on him to be healthy. You don't have a lot of right shot D. And if you're telling me I need 17 minutes from Timmins or I need 17 minutes from Liljegren, I'm still going to back Timothy Liljegren for 17 minutes, given what I've seen from those two guys' careers.
Yeah, no, I know that's the predicament we're in, because now you're forecasting the unknown, which is sort of, Tanev, shockingly has stayed pretty healthy the last couple of years. He has. And,
I think he played 75 games last year. Plus playoffs.
And McCabe plays with that edge. And, look, like McCabe was taking pucks to the face last year and not missing games. Like, this guy's a tough nut, right? So, I know the defense has been reworked, reshaped, and everybody's, more satisfied. But I'm curious even on Ekman-Larsson, because he got up to a heck of a great start last year when the Panthers had a lot of injuries. But if you want to take the time to track out his season up until the end of the year when the games are exceptionally hard, he started the year at about 23 minutes. By the end of the year, he was 15 and a half. Okay, so like you have to be realistic there too. What's going to be the best version of him? But I'm going to go back to that Liljegren statement that you opened up with just real quickly here. Like that whole mono thing, that's why you pre-scout. That's why you scout guys in their underage year religiously. That's why you wait it out for their draft year, because they might get draftitis and they're not they're stressed, whatever the case may be. Timothy Liljegren has always had the legs. He's teased you with the offense, but the brain farts have always been there. It's just something that has always been there in his career. I like him on his best nights. I really do. I really thought a couple of years ago, geez, let's give him more, because he had turned the corner, and he still might be sort of that. But I kind of feel like when I'm looking at him right now, he's when you're a little kid and you're getting scolded by your parents because he's done something wrong. It's not that he's done anything wrong, but he's got that look in his eyes like, geez, I'm a little bit scared. So I don't know. We'll see. But you're right. If Tanev and Timmins were ever to go down, and let's be honest, one of them will go down for a little bit of time. I would think, probably. It gets thin in a hurry for sure.
It really does. So I mentioned that Cade Weber gets a 2-year deal. It's a 2-way in year 1, but it's a 1-way in year 2. What did you think of that move, and how do you view him in a year from now?
I'm okay with the move. It's not an expensive type of scenario. The thing with him, JD, he's old, right? Like, well, I should say he's old. He's older for a prospect. He's already played 4 years of college. He's going to turn 24 this year in his first full year as a pro. And he is what he is. So, the thing there, you're buying stock knowing exactly what it is. He's a giant of a man. You're hoping that he can turn into Benoit-like, at the NHL level in terms of, just get in the way, use your length, do all those little, but he needs a full year in the American League to adjust to it's not so much the open ice pace, like when it's coming right at you, but it's the small area stuff. Despite his size, like if he goes up the half wall, he's got the length, he's got the stature, but when guys start spinning off you, like really quick skill guys at the pro game, those are the adjustments. So when he goes from his crease to defend the corner stripe in the wall or the half wall and get back to his net to readjust, that's where he's going to have to improve. It's worth the risk. It's fine. He's a big, strong shot blocker with some bite, some pushback, and it fits the type of player that the organization is looking for right now.
Okay, so last one. I want to ask you about Matthew Knies, because, yes, he's played a full season in the NHL, and I think we're pretty convinced of him being a really solid contributor. He's a guy I texted you about a couple of times last year, just being like, hey, there's lulls and dips, and you'd point to the hits, and you'd point to things like, no, this is totally fine. It's totally normal. He's 20 years old, or I think he's 21. Maybe he's going to be 22 this week. Whatever. He's right in that age pocket. He is in a year where it's his last one on his rookie deal. He's going to be an RFA this year. He's going to get another meaningful opportunity in the top six. I don't think he proved that was something he was ready for last season. You brought up the hits, but I do want to mention this stat. Last year, he only had 115 shots. And for context, Noah Gregor, who played almost 20 fewer games, shot it 110 times. And granted, I think that was too much of Noah Gregor. He was unafraid to shoot the puck when he was down on that fourth line, and he got his chances. But is it just a matter of being more aggressive for Knies? Is this how optimistic are you about this season for him? Because I think that one of the most important underlying stories outside of the core guys is whether or not this dude is going to look like he's a part of that core.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm fine with the progression here. Here's where I'm going to tell you about, the comparison to Gregor. That's fascinating. There's two types of players that score goals, or Knies is a power guy. He's a below the hash marks, net front guy. He's not necessarily a transition guy. He doesn't need to have the puck between the blue lines to push the pace to make plays. And, he's not going to waste one from the flank, for example. Now, having said that, does he need to shoot it more? 100%. Part of the reason that you play a power game is not to look to extend it to your line mates. You got to take the puck to the paint yourself and get it there, more often as well. I'm not the least bit concerned about it. I've seen, some talk of, I haven't gone there in my mind yet. I have to tell you that. I haven't gone to, where I'm thinking big numbers yet for this guy. I need his ice time to go way up. So he was, and maybe the new coach does that, but he was under 14 last year on average for the season with very little shorthanded time, a cup of coffee on the power play, which is hard to break into with this team. But 15 goals, he's a plus player. He's a power body, top six guy on projection for me on this roster and on any good roster, to be honest with you. More pucks to the net, continue to do the things that you identify with very well. But the coach is going to love him because he's going to work up and down the ice. He's going to play the style that Craig Berube wants. Fascinating to see going forward what that number is going to look like, and if they want to go long term or go bridge, because teams aren't doing bridge deals, JD, the way they used to. They're doing these long term risk deals, and it's some work, some don't. If
they were asking you though, hey, what do you think, bridge or long term today? What would you advocate for?
I would advocate for a bridge deal.
Okay. That tells me he's got a lot still to prove to you.
Yeah, I want him to get over. I need him to be an 18-minute guy. I want him to be more on the power play, and I need him to be 20 plus. But that's just me being selfish out of the box. I guess the agent would have to get inside my head and try and convince me otherwise.
Listen, I think it's fair to do it. There's a lot of really positive markers. Got to tell you though too is one thing that always sucks about the core four model is that it's just the power play is the same every time, and so some of these guys, it's like they don't get any time you get to see them on special teams. You're gonna get a minute 25, a minute 30 of the core four forwards, and it's tougher to evaluate what some of those guys can do in those spots when they get the chance to play meaningful offense. It's one thing that I think hurts Robertson if you're wanting a trade somewhere else. It's one thing that I think hurts Knies when he's trying to project out what his complete point totals are, trying to round that ice time out a little bit better. It drives me crazy. That was always a question, and it's kind of a little bit under discussed even when those guys are not, even though the power play is discussed at nauseum. Does that hurt you at all as a talent evaluator? When you can't see a guy play special teams in big minutes?
No, because I think that when you score 15 at even strength, with the amount of ice time you've been given, I think that I'm banking on if you had that role, you probably have another 6 or 7 tucks in your belt. You know what I mean? Yeah. So Mitch Marner scored 17 at even strength last year. Matthew Knies had 15. So, it's you can skin it a variety of ways, but the power. And if he goes to 20 and he gets very little power play time, then we're talking about something.
Yeah. Jason, thanks as always for the time, buddy. Enjoy the season, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, pal. Good to talk with you.
Always, buddy. Always. Talk to you soon. Jason Bukala, again, former director of amateur scouting for the Florida Panthers.